One Sunday, a cowboy went to church. When he entered, he saw that he and the preacher were the only ones present. The preacher asked the cowboy if he wanted him to go ahead and preach. The cowboy said, "I'm not too smart, but if I went to feed my cattle and only one showed up, I'd feed him." So the minister began his sermon. 1 hour passed, then 2 hours, then 2.5 hours. The preacher finally finished and came down to ask the cowboy how he liked the sermon. The cowboy answered slowly, "Well, I'm not very smart, but if I went to feed my cattle and only one showed up, I sure wouldn't feed him all the hay." A cowboy had spent many days crossing the Montana prairies without water. His horse had already died of thirst. He's crawling along the dusty ground, certain that he has breathed his last breath, when all of a sudden he sees an object sticking out of the ground several yards ahead of him. He crawls to the object, pulls it out of the ground, and discovers what looks to be an old briefcase. He opens it, and out pops a genie. But this is no ordinary genie. She is wearing an IRS ID badge and a dull gray dress. There's a calculator in her pocketbook. She has a pencil tucked behind one ear. "Well, cowboy," says the genie, "you know how I work. You have 3 wishes." "I'm not falling for this," said the cowboy. "I'm not going to trust an IRS genie. What do you have to lose? You've got no transportation, and it looks like you're a goner anyway." The cowboy thinks about this for a minute and decides that the genie is right. "Okay, I wish I were alongside a lush spring with plenty of food and drink." Poof, the cowboy finds himself beside the most beautiful spring he has ever seen, and he's surrounded with jugs of wine and platters of delicacies. "Okay, cowpoke, what's your second wish?" "My second wish is that I was rich, beyond my wildest dreams." Poof, the cowboy finds himself surrounded by treasure chests filled with rare gold coins and precious gems. "Okay, cowpuncher, you have just one more wish. Better make it a good one." After thinking for a few minutes, the cowboy says, "I wish that no matter where I go, beautiful women will want and need me." Poof, he was turned into a tampon. Moral of the story? If the U.S. government offers to help you, there's going to be a string attached. In the men's bathroom, an accountant, a lawyer, and a cowboy were standing side by side using the urinal. The accountant finished, zipped up, and started washing and literally scrubbing his hands, clear up to his elbows. He used 20 paper towels before he finished. He turned to the other 2 men and commented, "I graduated from the University of Michigan, and they taught us to be clean." The lawyer finished, zipped up, and quickly with the tips of his fingers, grabbed 1 paper towel and commented, "I graduated from the University of California, and they taught us to be environmentally conscious." The cowboy zipped up and, as he was walking out the door, said, "I graduated from Texas Tech University, and they taught us not to piss on our hands." An Englishman and a Scotsman go to a pastry shop. The Englishman whisks 3 cookies into his pocket with lightning speed. The baker doesn't notice. The Englishman says to the Scotsman, "You see how clever we are? You'll never beat that." The Scotsman says to the Englishman, "Watch this. A Scotsman is always cleverer than an Englishman." He says to the baker, "Give me a cookie, and I can show you a magic trick." The baker gives him the cookie, which the Scotsman promptly eats. Then he says to the baker, "Give me another cookie for my magic trick." The baker is getting suspicious, but he gives it to him. He eats this one, too. Then he says again, "Give me one more cookie." The baker's getting angry now, but gives him one anyway. The Scotsman eats this one, too. Now the baker's really mad and he yells, "And where is your famous magic trick?" The Scotsman says, "Look in the Englishman's pocket." An Englishman, Scotsman, and an Irishman are all working on a construction site, building a new skyscraper in London. It's lunchtime and they're all sitting atop the building. The Englishman opens up his lunchbox to see what his wife has packed him. "Ugh, ham and cheese sandwich. Again. I'm of ham and cheese sandwiches. It's the same every bloody day. If I get another ham and cheese sandwich in my lunchbox tomorrow, I'm jumping off the top of this building." Next, the Scotsman opens up his lunchbox. Jam sandwich. Again. I cannot go on like this, eating jam sandwiches every day of my life. If I get the same again tomorrow, I'm jumping as well. Next, it's the Irishman's turn. "Oh, for sake, not another egg and cress sandwich. That's the 4th one in a row this week. I'm with you, boys. One more egg and cress sandwich, and I'm jumping." So the next day, they sit at the top of the building to have lunch. One by one, they open up their lunch boxes, and find another ham and cheese sandwich, so off he jumps and splats into the ground below. A Scotsman finds another jam sandwich. Off he goes. Splat. Irishman egg and cress sandwich. Splat. A week or so later, the three widows are talking at the memorial service. The English widow says through tears, "I still can't believe it. I had no idea George hated ham and cheese so much. If only I'd known." The Scottish widow says, "Duncan did say he was getting a bit bored of jam, but I didn't realize he hated it that much. I just wish he'd have let me know how he really felt." The Irish widow says, I just don't understand. Paddy packed his own lunch. There was a lady who had a dog that she loved, and he followed her everywhere. One morning, she woke up, went to the bathroom, came out, and realized that her dog wasn't at her feet. She found him in his bed, sleeping. She called his name, but he didn't get up. So she took him to the vet and told the vet that her dog wouldn't wake up. So he looked at her dog and said, "Your dog is dead." She asked the doctor to perform another test to be sure. The doctor went into another room and came back with a cage. In it, there was a cat. He let the cat out, and she walked around the dog, sniffed, and went back in her cage. The doc put the cat back in the other room. He came out and said again, "Your dog is dead." She was like, "Okay, how much do I owe you?" The doctor said, "Oh, $300. She said, "What? How could it cost that much?" He said, $15 for me to say he was dead. Then $285 for the CAT scan. A dog lover, whose dog was a female and in heat, agreed to look after her neighbor's male dog while the neighbor was on vacation. She had a large house, and she believed that she could keep the two dogs apart. However, as she was drifting off to sleep, she heard awful howling and moaning sounds. She rushed downstairs and found the dogs locked together and unable to disengage, as frequently happens when dogs mate. Unable to separate them and perplexed as to what to do next, and although it was very late at night, she called her vet, who answered in a very grumpy voice. After she explained the problem to him, the vet said, "Hang up the phone and place it down alongside the dogs. I will then call you back, and the noise of the ringing will make the male lose his erection and he will be able to withdraw." "Do you think that will work?" she asked. "Just worked for me," he replied. This is so true. They always ask at the doctor's office why you are there, and you have to answer in front of others what is wrong, and sometimes it is embarrassing. There's nothing worse than a doctor's receptionist who insists you tell her what is wrong with you in a room full of other patients. I know most of us have experienced this, and I love the way this old guy handled it. A 75-year-old man walked into a crowded waiting room and approached the desk. The receptionist said, "Yes, sir, what are you seeing the doctor for today?" "There's something wrong with my he replied. The receptionist became irritated and said, "You shouldn't come into a crowded waiting room and say things like that." "Why not? You asked me what was wrong and I told you," he said. The receptionist replied, "Now you've caused some embarrassment in this room full of people. You should have said there is something wrong with your ear or something, and discussed the problem further with the doctor in private." The man replied, "You shouldn't ask people questions in a room full of strangers if the answer could embarrass anyone." The man walked out, waited several minutes, and then re-entered. The receptionist smiled smugly and asked, "Yes?" "There's something wrong with my ear," he stated. The receptionist nodded approvingly and smiled, knowing he had taken her advice. "And what is wrong with your ear, sir?" "I can't piss out of it, he replied. The waiting room erupted in laughter. Mess with seniors, and you're going to lose. An 86-year-old man went to his doctor for his quarterly checkup. The doctor asked him how he was feeling, and the 86-year-old said, "Things are great, and I've never felt better. I now have a 30-year-old bride who is pregnant with my child." "So what do you think about that, Doc?" The doctor considered his question for a minute and then began to tell a story. "I have an older friend, much like you, who is an avid hunter and never misses a season. One day he was setting off to go hunting. In a bit of a hurry, he accidentally picked up his walking cane instead of his gun. As he neared a lake, he came across a very large male beaver sitting at the water's edge. He realized he'd left his gun at home, and so he couldn't shoot the magnificent creature. Out of habit, he raised his cane, aimed it at the animal as if it were his favorite hunting rifle, and went Bang, bang. Miraculously, 2 shots rang out and the beaver fell over dead. Now, what do you think of that? Asked the doctor. The 86-year-old said, logic would strongly suggest that somebody else pumped a couple of rounds into that beaver. The doctor replied, my point exactly. Dr. Goldberg was a renowned physician who earned his undergraduate, graduate, and medical degrees in his hometown, and then left for Manhattan, where he quickly rose to the top of his field. Soon he was invited to deliver a significant paper at a conference, coincidentally held in his hometown. He walked on stage and placed his papers on the lectern, but they slid off onto the floor. As he bent over to retrieve them, at precisely the wrong instant, he inadvertently farted. The microphone amplified his mistake resoundingly through the room and reverberated it down the hall. He was most embarrassed, but somehow regained his composure just long enough to deliver his paper. He ignored the thunderous applause and raced out the stage door, never to return to his hometown again, until many years later, when his elderly mother was ill, and he returned to visit her. He reserved a hotel room under the name of Smith and arrived under cover of darkness. The desk clerk asked him, is this your first visit to our city, Mr. Smith? Dr. Goldberg replied, well, young man, no, it isn't. I grew up here and received my education here, but then I moved away. Haven't you visited since? Asked the desk clerk. Actually, I did visit once, many years ago, but an embarrassing thing happened, and since then, I've been too ashamed to return. Trying his best to console him, the desk clerk replied, sir, while I don't have your life experience, one thing I have learned is that often what seems embarrassing to me isn't even remembered by others. I bet that's true of your incident, too. Dr. Goldberg replied, son, I doubt that's the case with my incident. The clerk asked, was it a long time ago? Dr. Goldberg replied, yes, many years. The clerk asked, was it before or after the Goldberg fart? An engineer who was unemployed for a long time decided to open a medical clinic. He puts a sign outside the clinic, a cure for your ailment guaranteed at $500. We'll pay you $1,000 if we fail. A doctor thinks this is a good opportunity to earn $1,000 and goes to his clinic. Doctor, I have lost my sense of taste. Engineer, nurse, please bring the medicine from box 22 and put 3 drops in the patient's mouth. Doctor, this is gasoline. Engineer, congratulations, you've got your taste back. That will be $500. The doctor gets annoyed and goes back after a couple of days later to recover his money. Doctor, I have lost my memory. I cannot remember anything. Engineer, nurse, please bring the medicine from box 22 and put 3 drops in the patient's mouth. Doctor, but that is gasoline. Engineer, congratulations, you've got your memory back. That will be $500. The doctor leaves angrily and comes back after several days, more determined than ever to make his money back. Doctor, my eyesight has become weak. Engineer, well, I don't have any medicine for this. Take this $1,000, passing the doctor a $500 note. Doctor, but this is $500. Engineer, congratulations, you've got your vision back. That will be $500. The first says, this is a nice bar, but where I come from, there's a better one. At McDougal's, you buy a drink, you buy another drink, and McDougal himself will buy your 3rd drink. The second then starts, that sounds like a nice bar, but where I come from, there's a better one called Quinn's. At Quinn's, you buy a drink, Quinn buys you a drink. You buy another drink, Quinn buys you another drink. Then the third pipes up. You think that's good? Where I come from, there's this place called Murphy's. At Murphy's, they buy you your first drink, they buy you your second drink, they buy you your 3rd drink, and then they take you in the back and get you laid. Wow, say the other 2. That sounds fantastic. Did that actually happen to you? No, replies their friend, but it happened to my sister. 2 men are sitting next to each other in an Irish-style pub in New York City, and both order pints of Guinness. One of them turns to the other and asks, so where are you from? I'm from Ireland. Me too. I'll drink to that. They both finish their pints and order 2 more. Where in Ireland are you from? Dublin. Me too. I'll drink to that. They both finish their pints and order 2 more. Where in Dublin are you from? The East Side. The East Side? Me too. What a coincidence. I'll drink to that. They both finish their pints and order 2 more. Where on the east side are you from? McDonough Street. Me too. This is incredible. I'll drink to that. As the bartender pours them another 2 pints, another customer at the bar says to him, That's amazing. I can't believe they're from the same street in Dublin. What's going on? Oh, it's nothing amazing, says the bartender. It's just the Ferguson brothers getting sloshed again. An Irishman walks into a bar in Dublin, orders 3 pints of Guinness, and sits in the back of the room, drinking a sip out of each one in turn. When he finishes them, he comes back to the bar and orders 3 more. The bartender approaches and tells him, You know, a pint goes flat after I draw it. It would taste better if you bought one at a time. The Irishman replies, Well, you see, I have 2 brothers. One is in America and the other in Australia, and I'm here in Dublin. When we all left home, we promised that we'd drink this way to remember the days when we drank together. So I drinks one for each of me brothers and one for meself. The bartender admits that this is a nice custom and leaves it there. The Irishman becomes a regular in the bar and always drinks the same way. He orders 3 pints and drinks them in turn. One day he comes in and orders 2 pints. All the other regulars take notice and fall silent. When he comes back to the bar for the second round, the bartender says, I don't want to intrude on your grief, but I wanted to offer my condolences on your great loss. The Irishman looks quite puzzled for a moment. Then a light dawns in his eye and he laughs. Oh, no, everybody's just fine, he explains. It's just that me wife had us join that Baptist church and I had to quit drinking. Hasn't affected me brothers a bit, though. On Johnny's wedding night, he was both nervous and excited. As he and his bride were alone in the room, he began helping her out of her wedding dress, his hands trembling with anticipation. But then, to her shock, Johnny pulled out a matchbox and lit a match under her. You know, startled, the bride screamed, Are you out of your mind, Johnny? What the hell are you doing? Johnny, looking utterly confused, replied, Well, my friends told me. Before you start, you've got to warm her up. Paddy staggered home very late after another evening with his drinking buddy, O'Toole. He took off his shoes to avoid waking his wife, Kathleen. He tiptoed as quietly as he could toward the stairs leading to their upstairs bedroom, but misjudged the bottom step. As he caught himself by grabbing the banister, his body swung around and he landed heavily on his rump. A whiskey bottle in each back pocket broke and made the landing especially painful. Managing not to yell, Paddy sprung up, pulled down his pants, and looked in the hall mirror to see that his butt cheeks were cut and bleeding. He managed to quietly find a full box of Band-Aids and began putting a Band-Aid as best he could on each place he saw blood. He then hid the now almost empty Band-Aid box and shuffled and stumbled his way to bed. In the morning, Paddy woke up with searing pain in both his head and butt, and Kathleen staring at him from across the room. She said, You were drunk again last night, weren't you? Paddy said, Why would you say such a mean thing? Well, Kathleen said, it could be the open front door. It could be the broken glass at the bottom of the stairs. It could be the drops of blood trailing through the house. It could be your bloodshot eyes, but mostly, it's all those Band-Aids stuck on the hall mirror. Paddy had been drinking at his local pub all day and most of the night. Mick, the bartender, says, You'll not be drinking any more tonight, Paddy. Paddy replies, Okay, Mick, I'll be on my way then. Paddy spins around on his stool and steps off. He falls flat on his face. Damn, he says, and pulls himself up by the stool and dusts himself off. He takes a step towards the door and falls flat on his face. Oh, bloody damn! He looks at the doorway and thinks to himself that if he can just get to the door and some fresh air, he'll be fine. He belly crawls to the door and shimmies up to the door frame. He sticks his head outside and takes a deep breath of fresh air, feels much better, and takes a step out onto the sidewalk and falls flat in his face. Bejesus, I'm in bloody trouble, he says. He can see his house just a few doors down and crawls to the door, hauls himself up the door frame, opens the door, and shimmies inside. He takes a look up the stairs and says, No bloody way. He crawls up the stairs to his bedroom door and says, I can make it to the bed. He takes a step into the room and falls flat on his face. He says, Damn it, and falls into bed. The next morning, his wife, Jess, comes into the room carrying a cup of coffee and says, Get up, Paddy. Did you have a bit to drink last night? Paddy says, I did, Jess. I was bloody pissed. But how did you know? Mick phoned, You left your wheelchair at the pub. A farmer stopped by the local mechanic's shop to have his truck fixed. They couldn't do it while he waited, so he said he didn't live far and would just walk home. On the way home, he stopped at the hardware store and bought a bucket and a gallon of paint. He then stopped by the feed store and picked up a couple of chickens and a goose. However, struggling outside the store, he now had a problem: how to carry his entire purchase home. While he was scratching his head, he was approached by a little old lady who told him she was lost. She asked, "Can you tell me how to get to 1603 Mockingbird Lane, Nie?" The farmer said, "Well, as a matter of fact, my farm is very close to that house. I would walk you there, but I can't carry this lot." The old lady suggested, "Why don't you put the can of paint in the bucket? Carry the bucket in one hand, put a chicken under each arm, and carry the goose in your other hand." "Why, thank you very much," he said, and proceeded to walk the old girl home. On the way, he says, "Let's take my shortcut and go down this alley. We'll be there in no time." The little old lady looked him over cautiously and then said, "I am a lonely widow without a husband to defend me. How do I know that when we get in the alley, you won't hold me up against the wall, pull up my skirt, and have your way with me?" The farmer said, "Holy smokes, lady, I'm carrying a bucket, a gallon of paint, 2 chickens, and a goose. How in the world could I possibly hold you up against the wall and do that?" The old lady replied, "Set the goose down, cover him with the bucket, put the paint on top of the bucket, and I'll hold the chickens." 4 guys were golfing when one gets a phone call and walks away. The other 3 guys start talking about how successful their sons have been. The first guy explains how his son started as an entry-level stockbroker but now owns his own wealth management firm. The last time he got a friend a gift, he gave him a $500,000 investment portfolio. The second guy then brags about his son. "My son is so successful. He started out as a used car salesman but now owns his own dealership. He recently gave a friend a brand new Bentley as a birthday gift." The third guy, not to be outdone, says that his son started as a carpenter but now owns a construction company. The last gift he gave a friend was a brand new house. At this point, the fourth guy returns from his call. The other gentleman asks about his son, to which he replies, "Well, I'm not too pleased with my son right now. He has been unemployed for the last year and a half, and he recently told me he is gay." As the other men look at him in horror, he continues, "But he must be really good at what he does because his last 3 boyfriends gave him a huge stock portfolio, a new luxury car, and a brand new house." A lawyer runs a stop sign and gets pulled over by a sheriff's deputy. He thinks that he is smarter than the deputy because he is a lawyer from New York and is certain that he has a better education than any cop from Houston, TX. He decides to prove this to himself and have some fun at the Texas deputy's expense. The deputy says, "License and registration, please." "What for?" says the lawyer. The deputy says, "You didn't come to a complete stop at the stop sign." Then the lawyer says, "I slowed down and no one was coming." "You still didn't come to a complete stop," says the deputy. "License and registration, please." The lawyer says, "What's the difference?" "The difference is you must come to a complete stop. That's the law. License and registration, please," the deputy repeats. Lawyer says, "If you can show me the legal difference between slow down and stop, I'll give you my license and registration, and you give me the ticket. If not, you let me go, and don't give me the ticket." "That sounds fair. Please exit your vehicle, sir," the deputy says. At this point, the deputy takes out his nightstick and starts beating the shit out of the lawyer and says, "Do you want me to stop or just slow down?" My landlord is fond of entering our houses anytime he likes and asking us what we cooked. Baba won't leave until he eats. For weeks now, this man has been eating 3 square meals from everybody's houses. Meanwhile, he doesn't do anything in the house. If the borehole spoils, we fix. Light has issues, we fix it. Soak away is full, we drain it. He doesn't contribute a dime. The only good thing is he doesn't increase the rent. Since I moved in, the rent has been the same, but peace of mind has reduced pate. One of my babes came to visit me, so I quickly cooked jollofi rice and fried chicken. We wanted to eat before I eat her. The next thing, Ova landlord barged in. He sat down on my bed and started watching TV. Omro, I didn't want to serve the food because I didn't want him to join. That's how he sat there, watching TV for over 30 minutes. I switched off the main switch, but Baba laid down and started sleeping. I had to wake him up after an hour to eat, and immediately after eating, he left. I and the other tenants decided to move out. Because what sort of inconvenience is this? I contacted an agent and told him I needed a two-bedroom apartment in a very quiet and peaceful environment where the landlord is late or absent. The next day, this man asked me to meet him. I went, and he started showing me houses of 1.5 m, 2 m. We spent over 5 hours, and we didn't see a house less than 1.5 m. I told him I didn't like any of them and that he should keep looking. The next day, he called me again, and we went out. This time, I went with another tenant also looking for a house. The useless agent started showing me houses of 2.5 m and 3 m. I got angry and changed it for him. Baba Kiloseli, my rent is $350K presently, and I'm complaining. You're showing me houses of 3 m? Where do I want to see the money? He said there's no two-bedroom for $600K in Lagos. See again. My neighbor tapped me and said I should leave the man, that he has an agent. Any house you want, the man will find for you, no matter the budget. Immediately, we called the agent, and I spoke to him on the phone. I told him I wanted a two-bedroom flat for $350K or $400K, and the most I could pay was $450K. He said, "How see, but you must pay a registration fee of $10K." The news that there was an available house gave me joy. Immediately, I transferred the $10K to him, and he gave us the location. It took us about an hour to get to him from my area. When we finally met him, we entered a bike again and rode for another 45 minutes. Then we came down. We started walking inside the thick bush. I turned and looked at my neighbor. He looked at me. I started suspecting him of being a ritualist. Abby, did this guy plan with this agent to kill me? I faked a call to my babe and told her I was with my neighbor. I mentioned his name and told her he carried me to look for a house. Then I called two other people and told them the same thing. After another 30 minutes, we finally reached one swampy, quiet place. The agent smiled and said, "We don't reach." Then he pointed at a corner and said, "After you cross the bridge, that's the house." Bridge? I was excited. Small. There's a bridge here? Okay, so is the house under the bridge? He laughed and pointed at a wooden plank on the ground and said, "That's the bridge. Because of the swamp, we have to use the bridge. And then, over there, that's the two-bedroom." I looked, and the only house I could see was an uncompleted, unpainted, dilapidated building very close to the swamp. Around it were 3 graves. I shouted, "Baba, the house is no complete Anne? And is that not grave? Who died there?" He asked why I was shouting and said the house was complete. He said once I pay the rent now, in 3 days, they would finish it so I could pack in. "It's just painting," he added. I could clearly see that even in 6 months, they wouldn't complete the work. This guy was saying 3 days. "What about the 3 graves?" I asked. He said, "Sari, you say you want a house, but the Lord doesn't, right? That's the landlord's grave, his wife, and their first son." I heard a bike sound. I turned and saw the Okadaic man dropping someone. That's how I jumped and entered the bike, leaving the agent and my neighbor there. As soon as I got home, I called my landlord and told him, "I have ego soup. Come and eat. I've bought beer too. Eat, drink, and be satisfied. Because, man, you are. I know pack again." A plane is on its way to Toronto when a blonde in economy class gets up and moves to the first class section and sits down. The flight attendant watches her do this and asks to see her ticket. She then tells the blonde that she paid for economy class and that she will have to sit in the back. The blonde replies, "I'm blonde, I'm beautiful, I'm going to Toronto, and I'm staying right here." The flight attendant goes into the cockpit and tells the pilot and the co-pilot that there's a blonde bimbo sitting in first class that belongs in economy and won't move back to her seat. The co-pilot goes back to the blonde and tries to explain that because she only paid for economy, she will have to leave and return to her seat. The blonde replies, "I'm blonde, I'm beautiful, I'm going to Toronto, and I'm staying right here." The co-pilot tells the pilot that he probably should have the police waiting when they land to arrest this blonde woman who won't listen to reason. The pilot says, "You say she is a blonde? I'll handle this. I'm married to a blonde. I speak blonde." He goes back to the blonde and whispers in her ear, and she says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and gets up and goes back to her seat in economy. The flight attendant and co-pilot are amazed and asked him what he said to make her move without any fuss. I told her, first class isn't going to Toronto.